The war in northern Ethiopia has been one of the deadliest conflicts in recent times. The African Union envoy Olusegun Obasanjo said as many as 600,000 people may have been killed in the 2 years of fighting between Ethiopian troops and Tigrayan forces. UN investigators say rape and sexual violence were used as weapons of war and essentially mounted to war crimes. With a ceasefire agreed, more and more stories of the atrocities are emerging.
The 2nd of November 2022, just a few hours before the war in Tigray was declared over. A war that devastated millions of people's lives. But for Hadass, the worst was yet to come. On that day, the 16-year-old was at home with her mother near the town of Adwa in Tigray, when an Ethiopian soldier demanded to be let in. For her protection, we have changed her name.
He entered the house alone. He carried a stick with him. There was another soldier with a gun waiting outside. He tried to take me to the bush, but I refused. He told me he had a knife and a handgun. Then he beat me with the stick.
She started screaming. Neighbors tried to save her, but the soldiers threatened them.
I was crying and begging him, "Leave me alone. I am only 14 years old." But he gagged me. He asked me for my age. I told him I was 14, but he said, "You are a liar. You have breasts." My mother started crying too.
She still has nightmares of what happened next. Over the course of several hours, he raped her multiple times. The attack left her bleeding heavily. She managed to get some basic care at a nearby hospital, but desperately needs psychological care too, she says. She also feels anger.
They should be held accountable. They should be held accountable not only for me, but for all the victims of rape.
In Tigray's capital, Mekele, this doctor and hospital director has been struggling to provide care for patients like Hadass for the past 2 years.
We don't have any medications, emergency medications. We don't have any chronic medications. We can only provide 10 or 20% of the medications these patients need.
He had hopes that things would quickly change after Ethiopia's government and the Tigrayan forces signed the peace deal in November.
It's been almost 4 months since the agreement has been signed, and I would expect these things to be provided. And patients, they cannot wait. They are dying every day, and they are having so many complications every day.
Preventable deaths. People who make it here are just the tip of the iceberg, because only few can afford the transport costs. They were so overwhelmed at nearby Ida Referral Hospital that he had to open a new unit to treat the victims of sexual violence.
There were so many gang rapes. There were so many foreign materials inserted into their genitalia. Without exaggeration, I have literally cried writing some of the stories, and it's really worrisome to see this kind of cases as a medical doctor and at the same time as any citizen, as any human being.
They have treated over 500 rape cases here since the beginning of the war, he says. The victims say perpetrators are Ethiopian and Eritrean soldiers, as well as local militia. And the nurses at Ida Referral Hospital have confirmed that they saw numerous cases of sexual violence well after the war was declared over.
And DW News Africa reached out to the Ethiopian Government Communication Service for comment, but they did not respond to our request. We are now joined by Tarikwa Getachew, Director of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. Welcome to DW News Africa. Now, we just heard in our report from Hadass, she says she still has nightmares following her ordeal and she's angry. What is being done to help survivors like her?
Thank you, Tommy. We at the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, we've issued about 25 reports, including the one with the UN Human Rights Commission, the joint investigation report with the UN Human Rights Commission, since the start of the war. That's covering the period up to the time when the Ethiopian National Defense Forces withdrew from the Tigray region. And we've documented several incidents of violations of and abuses of human rights, humanitarian law, and refugee law. And we've indicated that some of these incidents constitute crimes against humanity and even war crimes. The sexual and gender-based violence cases, like the tragic story of Hadass, are some of the acts that we've noted as having been used to degrade and dehumanize the victims, and that they may constitute war crimes. But I would also like to say that the victims include men and boys, some persons with disabilities, and people who were targeted because they had family members taking part in either side of the conflict and the war.
Is this the main investigation going into each of these? Like, for example, Hadass talking about being raped by an Ethiopian soldier. Are you the main, the main source when it comes to these final reports?
Well, certainly we have talked to about 269 victims, families of victims, witnesses and sources, and other sources. But our reports constitute the most comprehensive documentation of these human rights violations, but we certainly by no means claim to be the only sources. But you've asked me about what happens next, and this has been the subject of our work since the end of the conflict and the start of the peace agreement, the signing of the peace agreement in November, and even earlier. We've carried out about 13 consultations in the war-affected areas, and we've listened to the victims like Hadass and tried to understand and gather information about what they want. We've talked to about 700 people, men and women, and they've indicated what they would like to see going forward, what justice means to them.
Ethiopia has always insisted that it wants to carry out this investigation on its own without intervention from outside. But we've seen the UN's human rights chief essentially say this has to be carried out by an independent body. Which way do you see it going? How independent are these probes going on?
The UN Human Rights Council has established the International Committee of Experts on Ethiopia, who have been given a broad mandate to carry out investigations and to collaborate with institutions in the region and in the country, including the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. Now, the International Committee itself has seen several changes of leadership and but in January we were very happy to note that they have welcomed the transitional process, the transitional justice process, and welcomed the opportunity to offer support to this process. There will be an interactive dialogue at the Human Rights Council on 21 March, and the International Committee of Experts will be presenting an oral update at this session. So we look forward to further insight on the next steps regarding that mandate and where it will head at the dialogue, at the interactive dialogue session.
Okay. Tariq Getachew, Director of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, thank you for speaking to us.